We continue our live coverage from Queen's Park this time, where Bonnie Crombie, leader of the Ontario Liberal Party, is speaking to the media.
Practice freely here in Ontario very soon. We can attract them here more easily, and then I hope that in other provinces they'll be able to enjoy our great Ontario wines and craft beers. So it's a great start, but a lot of work will still need to be done. As you all know, that the Ontario Liberal Party raised some very serious concerns about the Therme deal today at question period, and just wanted an opportunity to clarify some of those as well. I think that people need to have confidence in their government. Today more than ever, particularly what's going on south of the border, and we saw that the New York Times investigative reporter had some very serious revelations about the Therme deal. And frankly, I'm concerned that this could be Greenbelt 2.0. It just doesn't pass the smell test. Therme may have misrepresented themselves to justify their holdings, and they're now using Ontario to justify selling spas around the world. So what happened here, and the government support that they received, is what they're pitching elsewhere. Now, we know that Premier Ford always pitches himself as a very shrewd businessman, but let me tell you, this is not a shrewd deal, and he may have been played. My biggest concern there was no process, no due diligence, and no real competition, quite frankly, because any of the deals, according to the process, could have been selected. We know that the Auditor General and the Integrity Commissioner called the process unfair and flawed, particularly in the way that the environmental assessments were dropped, the fact that everyone seemed to have to sign NDAs, that execs at Therme were in touch with senior officials here at the province at IO throughout the bidding process. And these are big concerns of ours. This government, doesn't seem to be any rationalization for signing a 95-year lease with a company that perhaps may have misrepresented their holdings and was given $2.2 billion of taxpayers' hard-earned money. My concern is the opportunity cost. What could that $2.2 billion otherwise have done? We know the number of affordable housing units could have been built, 15,000. We could have hired more doctors and nurses, built more hospitals, added more teachers into our schools. We see overcrowded classrooms, or expedited the repair backlog in our schools. The reality is this government prioritized getting a spa built on public land and put more money towards that than they did towards their health care plan. And that, for me, is very concerning, and I think the people of Ontario should be very concerned about that as well. A spa versus a family doctor. And that's where I stand on this. Thank you.
Premier Ford acknowledged the article this morning, and some questions from my colleagues said he wants to double and triple check the contract at this point. What do you think about that?
As I said, Premier Ford has positioned himself as a very shrewd businessman in the past. He was going to get the best deal for the people of Ontario. The opposition parties had been asking these questions throughout this process. And now, after the fact, it took a New York Times investigative journalist to raise these concerns. Does he want to go back and check the facts? The Auditor General raised concerns. The Integrity Commissioner raised concerns. But now that a USA-based journalist is raising concerns, we're going back to check the deal. We knew the process was flawed. They should never have been given the deal, and we should not have wasted $2.2 billion on this deal.
Bonnie, do you think the government was hoodwinked, or do you think they knew?
This is for us to determine. This is for you to determine whether they knew and turned a blind eye, or the company successfully misrepresented themselves. This is what we yet have to learn.
On the free trade issue, so part of today's announcement was that the province is dropping all of Ontario's party-specific exemptions to the Canadian Free Trade Agreement. I'm still trying to figure out what that potentially means, but those were negotiated in there by a previous Liberal government, I do believe. Do you, I know it's early, have any concerns off the bat about doing that, what that could mean?
So as I said, we are aligned. We want to see the breakdown of interprovincial trade barriers. We need to diversify our trading partners abroad, but at home as well. We need to start at home, in fact. I don't care which government, negotiated those conditions. But the time has come that we need to make some changes. We've had a serious threat from south of the border with a U.S. president who has waging a trade war against us and potentially implementing some very punitive tariffs. So the need has arisen that we need to look for more diverse trade, and let's start at home first. So no, we are aligned. But then again, this is just a memorandum of understanding. This will be a long process, and this only triggers the beginning of a consultation process because a number of regulatory bodies, accreditation bodies, even frankly the federal government have to be involved in this process. And I'm delighted to see that 3 and perhaps 4 premiers are on board, and I hope we can bring the others on board as well, but I think there may be some greater challenges with some of the others.
But some of those barriers exist because companies were worried, right? Like I'm thinking these small brewers or wineries. Yeah, so what do you think needs to be included so that small businesses are protected?
Well, we need the protections in place for business, and I know that the Premier is looking at stimulus packages for business, and I think that's the correct first step as well. But at the same time, we have to look at the big picture. It's time to drop trade barriers. And let's take the example of nurses and doctors and the accreditation differences among each of the provinces. Wouldn't that be great if not only the flow of goods, but of services, and particularly that of our healthcare practitioners, to get them freely moving across the country?
When it comes to booze is big money, we know that. All it is direct to consumer sales. So I would have to know the name of a winery in some other province, go on their website and order. I don't know, like the Premier has spouted these very large numbers in terms of breaking down these trade barriers, what it could mean. I'm just not clear, how much money do you think this will actually mean?
So we don't know that. He cited 7% of GDP, I believe. The reality is this is just the start, and there's going to be a lot of work to do. I think this will be a long process. I think it's the right process. And I'm delighted we're moving in that direction. And as I told you, we would support stimulus, and we supported breaking down barriers and diversifying our trading partners. I would have also supported insulating other sectors of our economy, other than just EV batteries and the automotive industry. Let's support elsewhere where we have strengths.
So the Liberals will be supporting this bill, it sounds like.
Well, we have to look at the details, Laura, of course, but certainly the principle of the bill we do support, right? And I'm sure we'll maybe making suggestions for amendments.
How confident are you that we will get deals signed with all the other provinces? And what advice would you have for the Premier on that?
Well, as you well know, I've asked a number of times to sit down and talk to him and give him my feedback, and we've actually written and asked for the full briefing. How confident am I? I hope they realize that this is the right thing to do at this time in our history, when global financing and global economics has changed fundamentally because of the political shift south of the border. So I hope everyone puts the interests of all Canadians first, rather than just the needs of their own province. This is the time to make that change. So I'm very hopeful that we can come to that conclusion. Thank you for joining us.
And Ontario Liberal leader Bonnie Crombie has been addressing the media, commenting on the announcement of unlocking free trade within the country, saying that this is a great start. When it comes to the Therme deal, mentioning the New York Times report, Crombie says that this is Greenbelt 2.0 and that Premier Ford may well have been played. When it comes to the $2.2 billion that was spent, Crombie named how that money could have been put to better use, like housing, also saying a spa versus a family doctor. And when asked if the government was hoodwinked or if they knew, Crombie says, that has to be determined.